No, you can't do that. You can't do that if he doesn't have big news. You can't do that if he's just doing First Take with Mark Cuban. You can't. No, that only happens with big news.
Apparently, you weren't listening an hour and 15 minutes in because I heard some pretty good stuff there.
There was not news there. There was not.
He's still donating even after he hates the guy?
All right, we'll find out in a second.
Episode.
I'm finally reading some criticism of Pablo Torre. This is from Jay Mariotti's Substack. Any investigation of Steve Ballmer should center on one dude, Pablo Torre. And then the subheadline is, once again, Torre is in a mess as he asks us to find out on his podcast. The NBA vetted and approved Ballmer's deal with Aspiration, which suggests he's wrong in suggesting the owner was crooked. What is Jay Mariotti's problem with you?
This is hello, Chris. Thanks for listening to some of the episodes. I really appreciate that, sincerely. Is Jay Mariotti? I haven't read this yet. Is Jay Mariotti still blaming me for the cancellation of Around the Horn? Is
yes.
that okay? So is there that? Is my question number one. Number two, for anyone who's wondering who is Jay Mariotti, that's a fair question. You should Google Jay Mariotti sometime, and maybe just throw in the word stock, just as a matter of just general guidance. You might want to see what he had been up to at some point. The third thing, I love, so the Cuban thing is, I hate when Dan cuts to the core of me because, yes, me and Mark Cuban did some First Take allegedly about my journalism. Really, it was arguing. I love it, though, because I want people to give me arguments so I can try and defend the work, because I frankly want to make sure I'm not missing anything. And I've been asking everybody, what are your criticisms? What are your arguments? And the Clippers, we've seen what those are. They don't have any. Media Day did not have those leaks. Typically, you get some good leaks from like media, sources of the team. We haven't really had those either. And Jay Mariotti's here now. And so I just feel like, I don't know, maybe the story's over now. Maybe when you get to the Mariotti line, the story's actually over, because I don't think he knows what he's talking about.
He's blaming. He is blaming you. Torre has done this on my former program, Around the Horn, the second ESPN show he allowed to fade off the air. And it's time his editors at The Athletic tell him he's leading the majors in strikeouts.
So a couple of cleanups there. I did not allow High Noon to get canceled. I was canceled. I feel like it's okay for a cancellation to be involuntary.
The second ESPN show he allowed to fade off the air.
I want to apologize to Tony Reale for doing the thing in Titanic that Jack and Rose did. I let him go. I took the door we were floating on, and I let him go. I allowed Around the Horn to go away. What was the other thing?
Why is he blaming you? I don't. Why when you come on?
Know.
When you come on, what do you mean you don't know? When you come on, when you come on and say, "Is he blaming me again for Around the Horn?" And I didn't know he had been blaming you until reading this. Why is he blaming you for Around the Horn?
I'm just glad he said it. I might be the reason why.
I've never talked to Jay. I assume Jay is thrilled. One of my favorite things about Jay Mariotti's Twitter account, which I have just looked up here, is that he inserts manually a photo of himself, like posing, for everyone. And I don't even care to make fun of him for the engagement on his tweets, because that's its own. I hate when people do that. To me, it's just sad. Ignore the numbers. Just look at the photos. He picked a good one for this one. He's like him in front of like a duck pond. I like that.
No, you say that's the good part of the bio. The best part of the bio to me is that he writes in ESPN ratings king.
Yes. Yes, that's right. You didn't know that, Dan?
I did not know that.
Did you know that, by the way, did you know? This is also news to the editors at The Athletic that they're my editors, because they, of course, are not. They are, if anything, horrified to hear that. God bless our partners, but they are not editing these things. He just doesn't know. I mean, look, even if I can... Do we want to talk about how Jay Mariotti was the ratings king at ESPN, or do we want to talk about the thing that ESPN.com reported, which Jay Mariotti has misinterpreted into something that I am kind of like baffled by in a real way, but I can go either direction on that.
No, let's just talk about what you did this morning with Mark Cuban, because he has entrenched himself on this in a way that leaves him, I think, largely alone. Where are his supporters, first of all, before you tell us what it is that you and Mark Cuban did on the latest episode of Pablo Torre Finds Out?
Where are Mark Cuban supporters?
Yeah, who else? Who else is publicly against you when you keep throwing facts at people that are vigorously reported? I thought all of these people scattered. I thought there were a lot of people, and it confused me at the beginning, and it suggested that people just hate the media, because a whole lot of people sided with Ballmer at the beginning, and I was really confused by it. But since then, you've done so much reporting that I've seen no one but Mark Cuban still standing, and now Jay Mariotti.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's Clippers PR, it's Mark Cuban, and Jay Mariotti, to give you a sense of what's going on here. Well, and in fairness, a lot of like people with Kawhi Leonard or James Harden avatars on Twitter. It's generally that's the dojo that I walk into ready to fight every day. And it's a bummer at this point. But I, in all sincerity, like the reason I wanted to have Cuban on the show was because I think it's really important, especially now, for journalists who do this sort of work to defend their work, to be able to defend their work. It's just key to how you make sure that people are hearing about your work. But then it's also, I think, only fair to the people that you're investigating or reporting on. And so in this case, like Mark Cuban coming into the studio, into our dojo, as he called it, a dungeon, which is fair, that's windowless and small, but full of journalism, and in this case, two people yelling at each other. I'm so grateful he did that, because we got to have what I would say is the most generously proportioned conversation about a complicated topic in which he got to say everything and anything he wanted. And so that is what I wanted to make sure people heard, is that this is the best that people got. And so it was.
What did he say that you found interesting? What did he say that was different from what it is that he said before?
I asked him, I think, the fundamental question in all of this, which I will ask everybody, and I ask truly, NBA, Clippers, Ballmer, everybody, why was this deal never announced? And Mark Cuban provided a theory I had not heard before, which is simply that they had just announced a Red Sox deal at the end of March, and they didn't want to step on that deal. And then I guess they never got around to announcing the Kawhi Leonard deal.
They made plenty of other announcements, Pablo, but they just kept omitting Kawhi.
For some reason, it's hard for me to just objectively, of course, describe what he's arguing, because I argued against it in the episode so lengthily, but it's just fucking insane. I'm sorry, it's just insane.
Pablo,
you signed Leo DiCaprio, Robert Downey Jr., Mike, you signed Drake, and you're like, look who we got. You spend more than 4 times all those A-listers combined on Kawhi, and you never announce it. And then you forget, apparently. You forget to announce it is basically what happens. And the business changes, and blah. It's just like you had months, and you never did it.
What's in it for Mark to just refuse to give an inch here? I mean, we know how difficult it is in these trying times for any man to admit when they are wrong publicly. But why does he simply refuse to make? We're not talking about grand logic leaps here. Like, he is asking for you to acknowledge something that doesn't make any sense when you present him the evidence. But he just holds firm there, refusing to give an inch. What's at play here? He keeps trying to lead the audience on, saying, listen, this is good for the Mavs. I could just turn around and say, no, it's not good for the Mavs, because there are a lot of people out there on the internet theorizing that allegedly this is happening all over the league, and you don't want people poking around.
This is what it makes me wonder. The initial yawn on this from people is like, oh, I hope nobody comes snooping around here, because there are all sorts of suspicious things that rich people do to compete when you try to curtail their richness.
I'm asking Pablo to do something that Mark apparently refuses to do, which is connect the dots here. Explain to me why Mark Cuban is so entrenched in his position.
Should I do this, though? I should.
Time to throw away all journalistic credibility and get reckless. Here is something we like to call reckless speculation.
You're good.
This is not journalism. This is not muckraking. This is Pablo being asked for his opinion.
So I think Mark Cuban is genuinely an internet-brained true poster. And I say that as an internet-brained true poster myself. I think he just is super, super online. He loves it. I mean, look, that's the generous interpretation, which is he just loves to argue about this. And even when I pointed out that he had written 17,000 plus words or whatever it was on Twitter about this, he then comes back and says a lot of that was ChatGPT. So I'm like, all right, so okay, I mean, whatever. Mileage varies on how much work he's putting into the Twitter thing, but nonetheless, he's super into it. The other part, which I raised in the episode, which I find very interesting, is more in the I would like Mark to connect these dots for me, which is that something that he never told me that and I hate to step on sort of like the finale of the episode, but something that I establish is that I did not realize that Clippers co-owner Dennis Wong, who was Steve Ballmer's college classmate, his best friend has been described to me, the guy who put in money into Aspiration, despite all these disclosures, having never put money in before, in December of 2022, that guy who's been talked about ad nauseum. I didn't realize that Dennis Wong lives in Dallas now. And in the episode, we basically play a series of clips, that Mark Cuban is in which they are done at these institutions, the Dallas Museum of Art, for instance, the George W. Bush Presidential Center, both in Dallas. We reference the fact that he owns this pickleball team, the Dallas Flash. We do these sort of references because at the end, what I end up asking him is whether he knows that Dennis Wong lives in Dallas and whether he knows that Dennis Wong is also heavily involved with all of those organizations I just name-checked for you in the last minute. The Dallas Museum of Art, he's on the board, George W. Bush Executive Center, leadership thing. He's on the advisory council. He is an owner, Dennis Wong is, of a major league pickleball team that plays Mark's team, as well as the fact that they're on the board of governors together, have been for a half dozen years until Mark sold his majority stake in the team. So I asked him that, and Mark said, he laughed at all of it. And so, look, you could take that as he's genuinely ignorant of the other NBA owner who's not a Mavs owner, who's in his city that is involved with these same organizations. Or you could see something else. I am merely, Dan, asking a question.
Did you have like a timeline in your head as to like when there may be discipline in this? And then I guess like another question is there like a smoking gun that's still out there that you're trying to find? Because as someone who's not as invested, obviously, as you, it feels like the longer this goes, the less likely there will be consequences for all of this.
So that is actually something that came up in this ESPN.com article that Jay Mariotti turned into some, whatever the opposite of a smoking gun is. You guys can workshop that. What is the opposite of a smoking gun? I don't know.
Cool pistol. I don't know.
A cool.
No, that is
It's
just
like,
another gun.
A rock?
Right. It's a freezing bulletproof vest. The freezing bulletproof vest that Mark Cuban saw in that .com article, that Jay Mariotti saw in that .com article, is something that I think Mark Cuban is also rooting for, which is that this investigation, in that article, it was speculated for the first time I had seen, might not be done until after the 2026 NBA playoffs. And so you're right, Billy, like the whole thing here, the whole game, which I keep on trying to say, why is it weird that Adam Silver said that he had never heard of Aspiration before? And then after I tweeted out the documentation for the $300 million contract, he then says to Front Office Sports, oh, I misspoke, in a way that is completely incoherent as an excuse when you watch back the initial video. There was no wiggle room there for misspeaking, by the way. So then when this ESPN.com article comes out, the one thing that it establishes is that the NBA had, in fact, vetted the $300 million deal, not the Kawhi Leonard $28 million deal, but the larger Clippers thing. And my only real takeaway from just that bit of news, which I had kind of already reported because I found the documentation, but nonetheless, let's go with it. The only bit of news there is that, the NBA did, in fact, expressly approve this. So why did Adam say that he had never heard of it? Maybe, again, he genuinely was ignorant of it, or maybe, connecting dots here potentially, there was some other motive. And if the motive that everybody in the league is telling me is that they don't want to punish this to the degree that your reporting is suggesting, then there are lots of just, freezing bulletproof vests and smoke screens and whatever else to just get in the way of actual punishment. So is there a smoking gun that I am searching for? There are about a dozen that are out there. I just not ready to report those.